bow. Come on, son.
You really are.
God damn!
Up, girl. Good luck, Eric. That's it.
Get easy, buddy.
Hiccup.
They were all gone for good. Looks like our luck's had a turn for the better, left to bits.
What are you talking about?
He may have a nice spitting dragon use, but we still have a quota to fill. Anything you say makes sense? He's expecting a new shipment, and last time I showed up empty-handed.
This dragon army, okay? Just give us back up.
Of Eret. Finest.
He says we're going. Now.
You will never hold on to...
He's challenging the Alpha.
To protect you!
Fight back! Fight! Fight! Come on!
Protects them all.
Five years had transmitted Berk in way on Viking ancestor would have believed possible. The Iceland that once burned with dragon's fire now thrived with winds of every shape and size. Dragons instead on rooftops carried lumbers of construction, helped fishermen half nets during the dusting with silverfish, and even warmed homes during winter that had once been a battlefield between species and equated into a living partnership. At the center of the transformation was Hiccup. And also we get a huge multi VFX movie. How to Train Your Dragon to get a possibility to attention with story. At the center of the transformation was Hiccup Horned Headaches the Third, no longer the scary, uncertain boy who once dubbed himself Hiccup, and growth into a thoughtful and inventive young man. His artificial leg forged from both necessity and reluctance no longer slowed him. Instead, it symbolized survival and growth, but deposit his achievements, especially burning space between dragons and Vikings, there remained something unsettled inside him. His father, Stokey the Vast, saw it clearly. Stokey was proud of his son, proud beyond words, yet pride comes the acceptation the role of chief would not belong to stick forever. The tribe needed continuously strength, leadership, and Sticky believed that strength already lived in Hiccup. Hiccup, however, felt differently. While Sticks discussed consular meetings, aliens, and the village defense, Hiccup performed open seas and uncharted horizons together with Toothless. They are night fairy dragons who had once been feared as the most dangerous creatures in the earth. Hiccup explored lands beyond Break Brothers. They mapped Iceland hidden by frog, discovered new dragon species, and documented estimation untouched by humans. Flyings with Toothless gave Hiccup clarity. Find the up there above the clouds. Leadership did not feel like a burden, it felt distanced. Once one afternoon during one of their exploration, Hiccups and the girlfriend arrested Hoffens wanted to unfamiliar treaty. Arrested friends and the sharp-minded had matured into a warrior as capable as any Viking before her. She balanced Hiccup idleness with grounded practically. The sun come across forest reduced to black-ended rainy. The plot and story is too much interesting of this movie due to multi-star cast, multiple roles of every character. The tree was not randomly scribbled. The burning patterns were controlled. Paris Hiccup examined crew marks in the Soli and Iron Trip hidden beneath Shesh. Before the cold react armed men surrounding them. These were not ordinary hunters. Their gear was specialized nets reinforced with metal cages designed specially for dinosaur dragons and weapons built of capture rather than killing. The leader, a confident man named Eret, spoke calmly, almost professionally. He explained that the work of someone powerful, Drago Bull visited. Drago, according to Eret, commanded an exploding army. He did not merely hunt dragons. He collected them, trained them, weaponized them. His ambition was absolute control over dragon kind. Hiccup tried reasoning with Eret insisting dragons were not monsters but intelligent beings capable of loyalty and the compassions. Eret laughed at the idea. To him, dragons were comrades When trappers attempt to resist Toothless, the situation interrupted into chase. Arrested Fox clearly Toothless determines his speech and the agility auto-motivation nest and the traps in the confusion he coped and arrested escaped. Back on Brick, the atmosphere shifted immediately upon hearing the news. Stokey's expression dark-nest at the mention of dragon name. Years early, Stokes had influenced him during a summit between tribal leaders. Dragon had arrived not as a diplomat but as conqueror. He offered protection from dragons but damaged submission in return. When the leader refused, Dragon unleashed Dragon under the command upon the gathering. Only Stokey survived. Now Dragons was returning strength, organization and the return-less. Sotix ordered defense preparations, ballistics, were repairs. Watchovers double their patrols. Viking warriors sharpened axes that had not been used in years. But Hiccup resisted to be invisibility of war. He believed dragons had come from fear and far could be changed. After all, he had not back once feared dragons. He had not the fear been overcome. Ignoring his father wearing, Hiccup made a decide to would find dragon himself. Toothless carried him across vast sea, thought storm, could and over city water instead of dragons felt. However, they entered something unaccepted along during ride, moving with the extraordinary grace. The rider controlled multi-dragons effortlessly, guiding them not thought force but thoughting understanding. In trials, Hiccup followed. Actually, he confirmed to ride a frozen cave filled with reduced dragons. When the rider moved her helmet, time seemed to freeze. It was this mother walking. Hiccup had grown up believing she died during a dragon ride. Stokey had rarely spoken of the grief too heavy to visitor, yet there she stood, older, weathered by years but alive. Valk explained everything during the ride. Years ago, she had not been killed. Instead, a dragon had carried her away. She discovered that dragons were not inherently violent. They reached to threats. Over time, she learned their behaviors, their communication, their emotions. She chose to protect them from human aggression. Volca led Hiccup to her sanctuary and dragon nest covered into a garruliously. The centerpiece of the ICY kingdom was a creature of unimaginable scale that believed breakfast that we will dear best. The alpha dragon's two words about mountains Its text were frozen plus it possible the rare ability to command other dragons thought powerful resident skulls, but unlike Dragon's version of the domination, this alpha ruled thought balance art and protection. Hiccup was over homeland not just by the size of the creature but by what is presented. Dragons had a complex social hierarchies. They are not well beasts, they were recognized intelligent. Soon Stocky and the Gober tracked Hiccup to the necessary. The reunion between Stoke and Volca was deeply emotional. Years of grief dissolved into a relief. For the first time in years, their family stood together. Yet the month of healing was short lived. When the horizon appeared, dragons felt had arrived. Massive warship cut through icy waters, cages filled with captive dragons lined their decks. Soldiers armed with specialized weapons peered to the invaded. Dragons himself stood at helm, cold and the clattering, and behind the feet moving someone even larger. Another also be make the outstanding visuals VFX. The sea troubles, the sea troubled as dragon armed advanced toward to frozen sanctuary. The water itself seems to recoil from that following behind the ships, a colossal shadow rising beneath the wave. Then the sufferers, dragons, bewildered best, emerged like a living glaciers. Its immense tracks craving thought the aquarian mist, ice cracking and the shattered around the armored body as it stopped into the frozen shoreline. Compared to the Vox gradients, this alpha appears shares better scoring and the harmed by conflict. Dragons with the sensory stary uneasily. Vox bewilder best responds with the resonating call. The echoes thought he convinced the information. Its voice was not simple sound, it was command. Dragons gathered intensely behind it. Two alpha now faced each other. Hiko watched in a way and thread. This was not merely a fight, it was struggle for dominance and every dragon parents. Dragon stopped forward into the city ICY battlefield. He presence radiates authority built not from composition but from the control. He arrested. He addressed Hiccup directly, dismissing this. Please for peace. Dragon spoke of this. Dragon spoke of this childhood of watching dragons destroy his village, of losing family, of growing up in fear. He had learned one lesson from Thready. Power was the only protection. This is the best dialogue of How to Train Your Dragon 2 movie. Hiccup tried again, insisting dragon would coexist with humans. He spoke of brick, of change, of true earned thought, understanding, but dragon's mind was skilled by year of hatred. The first strike came without wearing. The two bewildered beasts charged. Ice collided with ice in a thousands impact that shook the chief. Their sticks clashed like battering rams, each unlashed torrents of freezing breath. Turning section of occasion collide in second. The battlefield expand outward. Enough ship and the dragon alike in cortex forced. Similar dragon panicked, some attempting to fill, other closer to collision. The dragon's ride arrested, snout out, rufflets, turnflips, and the flesh leg. Joined the ferry trying to defend walk sensory dragon soldiers. But the scale of the alpha's battle devours everything else. Walks bewildered best folks defensively shielding dragon behind the imam's body. Dragon alpha attacked, recently pushing toward to the breath force. It was trained for war, conditioned of the domination. With the final devastating sugar, dragons bewildered best drew to strikes into a rival. The ice beneath them fracturing eventually. Valk's gradients let out of the fading rear before collapsing into the freeze sea. Silence following, then a new roar encroached. Dragon will breasting left the massive head and the unlashed a commanding blow that ripped across the battlefield. The sound vibrated through the air and ice alkings. One by one dragon loved their head, including Toothless. Hiccup felt the breath coach as the closest friend I changed. Glowing fairly under alpha influence, Toothless move shifting, no longer guided by the instinct of the friendship but by command. Dragons appeared. Hiccup would cool sensitization. You see, he declared, they obey strength. That is why the multi-star cast, multi-interesting story, How to Train Your Dragon to create this movie, most anticipated film of 2014, Dragon franchise part 2. Hiccup refused to back down. He stood before Toothless, calling his name, reminding him for everything they had shared. The first fight, the trust, the bond that had defined generation of the hatred. For a moment, Toothless yesterday, then the bewildered best control tightened. Toothless turned toward Hiccup and began charging a plasma blast. Everything slowed. Stocking said that was happening before anyone else. Without hesitation, without fear, he stopped between his son and the dragon's blast. The explosion enhanced across the frozen landscape. When the light faded, Stocky by motionless in the snow. Hiccups dropped to his neck, beast his father. Shocks overtook him before grief could even for Stocky, the unstoppable chief who had survived battle and storm and dragons, was gone. The movie story is much anticipated with the interesting dialogues. Toothless filmed momentarily for control after the blast, shared to confuse at what had happened, but dragons will their best. Residents' dominance and the night fury arrested to his new master. Dragons left the sanctuary victims, commanding an arm commanding an army of the Elevation Dragons. He maintains Toothless himself a cruel symbol of the Triumphs and set course from the Berk. The surviving riders returned home in silence, carrying Stoke's body. The bricks kicks once Viburn's felt hollow. That night, the Vikings honored their fallen chief with the traditionally funerals. His body was placed upon a ship surrounded by torches as they drifted into the sea. Filming arose inundated of the visuals. Fire meet water in a final tribute to a warrior who had once defined strength of his peoples. Hiccup stood apart from the crowd. Chief hunted into anger at dragons, at the Alpha, at Toothless and himself. The beloved his refusal to fight had caused his Dylan's had cost his father life. Vikings approached to him gently. He reminded him a stocky believe not in Buren's strength but in the Hiccup's ability to ununite world. Stocky had changed because of his son. Berky had changed because of him. Leadership she had was not inherited thought muscles, it was untaught hurt. Slowly clarity returns. Dragon was heading for Brick. If they did not nothing, the village would fall under the control. Hiccup devised a plan. Baby dragons too young to the influenced by the bewildered best could transport the riders back to Brick. Small angles and the ammunition to commando Dio responded hope. The group followed at down when they reached Brick. The sight was disverting. Ice in his home, dragons stood ground under the happy control. Vigil were defined at the center of it. All stood dragons riding Toothless as a symbol of the dominance. Hiccup landed before him. There is no speaks this time, no place. Hiccup walked toward Toothless slowly, ignoring dragons' stones. He spoke softly, not about war, not about loss, but about friendship. Because the friendship is the most biggest strength power of the world. He reminded Toothless who he was. Dragons ordered to bewilder bust the eliminate them both. Ice encroached upward, enhancing Hiccup Toothless in a frozen prison. For a brief moment, it seemed finished. The cracks appeared. Toothless shield Hiccup from the crashing ice with his wings. His eyes glowed not from control but from a Vikings. With a burst of energy unlike anything seen before, Toothless shattered but ice blue plasma surrounding him in a blazing aura. He had entered a new state, not submission, not insolved, independent independence, the bewildered best rower in defense. Toothless rode back. The duel began. Toothless darted toward the sky, the unmatched speech, firing concerted plasma blast. The mass alpha serpentine with swing wave of the ice, building sharp ice explosion explode. The village became a battlefield of fire and forest. But something had changed. Other dragons began breaking free for the bewildered best command, inspired by the toothless defense by the remember their bonds with riders. One by one they joined him, the sky filled with dragons, no longer an army of civils but aliens. Together they overwhelmed the gathering alpha. Toothless delivered a final charred blast that shattered one of the bewildered best strokes, standing shake wave across the harbor. Defend and wonders the collider's dragon returned arrested into the sea, carrying dragon's way with it. Silence slants over brick, ice melts slowly under return sunlight. Villagers embrace controlled dragon lands, based their riders. Peace had been reclaimed, but at great cost. In the days that followed, Bri begins rebuilding homes, where repairing ship, reconstructed life resumed, not unchanged but strengthened in a attempt by every village and dragons. Hiccup was formally named chief. This time he had not hesitated. He stood all, not because he felt invisible, but because he understood responsibility. Leadership meant sacrification. It means protecting both humans and dragons. It means standing fear in the beef even when challenged by fear. Waka chose to remain Briki, reconnecting with the home she once so lost. Toothless, recognized by Dragon as the who had been challenged, an alpha and Win assumed role of the new alpha among the yet remained at Hiccup Rider, not above him. As evening fell, Hiccup looks at over the restored village. Dragon Scory fairly once more. Children laughed. The wind carried on stand of smoke of air. Smoke of war. Stokes assume would always be felt, but this legacy entered not thought contest, but thought unity his son achieved. Hiccup understand now strength was not about domination, it was about connection. And as dragons filled the Skeeks Abri again, Chief and Alpha stood together, ready to define not just an Iceland, but a way of life built on trust. How to train your dragon to development history. The birth of large saga. When How to Train Your Dragon to began talking sheep, it was not merely conceived as a sequel, it was imagined as the next event in a such longer cinematics, a continuation that would deepen emotionally stakes within the world and transfer a coming of age adventure into an epic generational saga. The original of the sequel can be tracked back to the extraordinary recapitulation of How to Train Your Dragon. It's a multi-star cast and the underproduction work due to the heavily budget and VFX of How to Train Your Dragon 2. Upon its release in 2010, the first film exceeded expectation both critical and the comically audience were down not only to the thrill dragons fights and inverse Viking landscape but to the deeply emotional story of Hiccup and Toothless, a boy and a dragon refined to be relationship between two warring species. The film's sensitively humor and emotional width surprise a industry observer. At DreamWorks Animation success did not simply mean financial reward, it meant opportunity. Studio leadership quickly recognized that the story had franchise push potentially. The character felt alive. The world left expandable. The emotional art felt unfinished. Early conversation about the continuation even before the first film had fully completed its theatrical run. Initially discussions began about how the story could evolve a sequel in animation of often green-left box office confirmation. But in the case creative movement was already built behind the scene. Director Dan DeLones, who co-directed the first installment and did not initially see the project as something that demanded a simple continuation. Instead, he saw it as an opportunity to explore maturations both for the protagonist and the of the audience. The first film ended with humor restored between dragons and the Vikings, but harmony he believed was only the beginning of the complexity. While working on the final sound mix of the original film at Skywalker's ranked, Daniels began quietly Stickon's idea for that a sequel could explore. Rather than repeating the formula of the first story, he imagines to be something more expensive, emotionally darky, visual grand, and the narratively riskier. The key question becomes what happens after peace in the achieved, expanding the emotional universe. D. Belows understood that audience had grown attached to Hiccup not merely as a hero but was a honorable young leader still finding his identity. In the first film, Hiccup had proven that intimacy could defend organization, but in life growth rarely stops after on the tripod responsibilities increase, acceptation grow heavier. The sequel would before not simply present a new villain or a new dragon species. It would examine leadership, legacy, loss, and the cost of the adulthood. Internally, DreamWorks executive encouraged bloodness. Jaffer Kazatubins, who was leading the studio at the time, recognized that the franchise had the potential to become one of the company definitely properties. But unlike more comedies franchise, their series had a the next crore that mix crore needed to be room matures and also be reportedly spotted to idea of the trolley early on rather than stretching the narrate indefinitely. The goal was to build a strict three-act saga, a beginning, middle, and end, mirroring the structure of the classic piece storytelling. From the standalone story to planned thrilling, he shifted from sequel to middle chapter of the trolley changed everything. In a trolley, the second installation traditionally served as the emotional pivot, pointing the stage where incoherence is challenged and the conversation become irreversible. D. Belows understand the structure well. He did not want a repetition of the first film tone. Instead, he wanted clarity and the equal procedure with VFX and everything with the can do easily and easy to everything. He looked to classic cinema of audience. Among the films that shaped his thinking was The Empire Strike Back. That film depends to procedure mythology, introduced a new emotional confidence and the ended on a somber, uncertain note. It expanded the universe while intensity intensity character relationship. But was the D Belongs was also influenced by gentler yet emotionally found storytelling tradition. He admired the contemplative emotional learnings of my neighbor Tro, which destroyed his atmosphere and the emotional could quietly shape a narrative world. And also with these world before balance separate in the introspection. Time jump and character aging. One of the one of the earliest creative decision was to move the timeline forward instead of continuous immediately after the first film. Even the sequel would take place 5 years later. The maybe multi-star cast, visuals, VFX, body, the movie get a remarkable positive attraction and audience reverse platform. This choose allowed character to age narratively. Hiccup would no longer be an Awaker's teenager. He could be a younger adult standing on the edge of the leadership. The the other leadership of member starcast of story How to Train Your Dragon 2 is also be the other Viking youths would have matured as well. Relationships would evolve, romantic tension would deeply, responsibilities would increase. A time jump also allowed the dragon human exhortation to feel established backward transformed into a thriving dragon society colorful dynamic and the humans this vibrant opening environment would late contrast sharply with the dark force introduced in the story, balancing hope and the threat. In development discussion, once of corner repeatedly suffered how to maintain the worth of the original while introduce genius dancer. The answer was emotional truth rather than consider a villain who was evil simple of especially the sequel were introduced ideology confidence someone who believed in the dominations rather than actually the world outside brick world be not intelligent. Not every human would he share he cope feasibilities. This broader's world building transferred the shape of the film. The story was no longer confined to a simple island. It would stretch across frozen sea, dragons, structurally and the unknown treaties. Creative confidence a DreamWorks ammunition. By the stage in history, DreamWorks ammunition had already preceded several successful franchises. But How to Train Your Dragon held a different tone compared to other studio properties. It was more grounded, emotionally more restrained in its humor, and more cinematic in the staging. The sequel before required careful creative stewardship. D. Billons was given significant autonomous more than many animation directors traditionally receive. The automatically reflected trusted the studio recognized that the emotionally integrity of the first film come larger from the leadership prevents that integrity mean following the director to guide the evolution. The trust enable bold decision that be later defined the sequel, are common to emotional constructions. Perhaps that the most defining element of the equals early sequel early development it was willingness to embrace consequences. A many animated franchise character of face danger but rarely invert change. However, from early outline onward, DeBlois contemplates a narrative that could permanently and after Hiccup world he beloved. That trust narrative requires less not from the stock value but of the growth. This physicals appears shaped the emotional structure architecture of the film long before animation began. Scrolling up to the world, for a purely visual standpoint, the sequel was always intended to be large. The first film had established rugged cliffs, storm, seas, and dragons filled skis. The sequel would introduce mass ice waves, colors, dragon species, and the polar landscape. But scale was not pressured simply for the scatifieds. It was mean that reflect a cope expanding worldview as the grow so too does the world around him. The agreement between character growth and the environment expansion because a guiding principle thought development responsibility the responsibility of acceptation. By the time pre-production officially accelerate acceptation, we were high both internally and externally. Audience who loved the first film would acceptive emotional authorities critics and the surprise whether the sequel justify in extension. The creative team understand that sequel often struggle because they attempt to replicate that once worked. Instead, the guiding fidelity become evolution rather the repetitions. In this video, I will fully explain and the movie production, development, marketing, releasing, reception, a full story review of how to train your dragon 2. I hope you can enjoy this video. Please like my video, subscribe my YouTube channel. Let's start again with previous story continuous. The two create the also be the create team understand the sequel often struggle because they attempt to replicate that one worked. Instead, the guiding perhaps become evolution rather than repetitions. The question was no longer how do we make another successful dragon adventure. It became how do we depend the story into a something lasting. This break the multi efforts on the every development of how to train your dragon to story. As development progressed, our development progressed on how to train your dragon to the project began transmitting from abstract vision into a structured narrative design. The early conversation about the maturations, leadership, and the consequence now had to be the translated into a scene, character arcs, and emotional beats that would sustain a feature-length film. The stage of development was circular. Sequel often falter not because of weak idea but because these ideas lack struggles clarity of a director. Daniel Danny, its challenge was clear. The sequel need to be inventable, as if it had always been part of large story rather than refitted into a successful original. Building the screenplay from the concept to emotional viewpoint. Unlike the first film, which underwent significant restructuring during the development, the sequel began with a clear long-term roadmap. The director had already communicated to a trolley structure in the principle. That that second installment would function as the dramatic midpoint of large saga. In the classic storytelling theory, the middle chapter carries a particularly burden that must expand the world, deepen relationship, complicate more clarity, introduce irreversible change set the stage for a final resolution. The blueprint guide early draft thematics center identity and the inheritance. The central thematic question become what does it mean to be inherits leadership? Hiccup wants an understanding teenager who stood to thousand hold of the chief of Berk, but leadership in the narrative was not formed a glory. It was formed as a responsibility and the potential isolations. The screenplay explored the tension between personal freedom and the communal duty. Hiccup loved exploration to 30 in the sky with Toothless mapping unknown treaties. Yet Berk needed to be stability. His father's stick presented tradition and the strength. Hiccup's represented diplomacy and the innovation. Rather than presenting this as simple generational conflicts, the script treats it as the possibility trusted Stuck believed in the protection thought power Hiccup believed in transformation thought understanding. The sequel would test which physiology could survive as in a harass world, expanding the world behind Berk. One of the earliest structural decision was also be the greatest acceptation expansion. The first film was large contained with Berk and its surrounding waters. The sequel would deliberatize Berk to the boundaries. Hiccup exploratory fightings because the narrative engine that popular to be story outward the allowed in the screenplay to the introduce a remote dragon structure, hidden ice converse, dragon trap and warlords. Interior beyond Berk humidity. The expensive served two purpose. First, it visually justifies a large scale sequel. Second is the refers to be idea based on the Berk was sacrifice a local success not yet shared globally. In early draft, the creative team debated how much of the world to reveal too much expensive risked overwhelming audience. To title would undermine the EP ambition. Ultimation they choose selective rotation. Gill pose of the such longer wood that suggested deep without exhibitors explanations. The return of the original cast. As the story solidifies, attention turned to casting. Continuously emotional of the film depends heavily on voice performance, scoring the return of the original ensemble because of property. The sequel welcomed back Jay as a Hiccup, Gerard Butler as a Stoke, American Fred as a Astrid, John Hills, and also be the J.T. Miller, Kristen Wiig. Researchables, the imbecile was not merely longastrial, it was clarity, significance. 5 years had passed with the storytelling and similarity. The actors themselves had matured in their careers. This parallel against trouble influenced vocal performance. J J of Hiccup in particular require recalibrations to nervous condense and the uncertainty of the first film need to be evil into a something steadier yet still emotionally open. Hiccup was growing into a authority, but he had not lost his visibility. Recording scene because pace of the experiment dialogues shifted slightly to reflect age, positions, humor remind, but the comedic's energy felt more restrained and the solutions rather than never down. Introduce new voice and new is- energies and the properties while the development of How to Train Your Dragon 2. While continuity was the instable, expensive, damaged new character who could challenge the established worldview. One of the most significant addition was the character of the Valka voiced by the cat Bentels. Waka present introduced emotional and the Delico's complexity. He was neither villain nor environmental hero, instead the embraced Division 2 Dragons taken at its most radical extreme. Casting balance was the deliberate creative decision. Her voice carried both authority and the versatile qualities necessary of the character who would late equip understanding of family and the identity. Another key addition was Dragon, voiced by the demons. Unlike Took or the Hiccup, Dragon beloved in the domination as survival. His worldview was shaped by and Laws thought the film internationally avoid length exposition about his past. Dragons directly opposite Hiccup ideals where Hiccup sought partnership with the dragons to control his identity conflict formed to the backbone of the narrative tension. Additionally, Keat joined the cast, burning the recognition of his work Game of the Thrones. He is casting single a total maturity, excellent sequel, EP, fantastic tradition rather than the ammunition alone. Balance, separate, balancing with the story of the emotional gravity. With expensive and a large cost, there was a risk of the losing emotional in Misty Denal, the director was team to work carefully to every major step piece in character motivation. For example, a dragon battle was not simple about visual scale. It's tested Hiccup belief in the diplomacy. A confidence between father and son was just not dynamic conflict. It represent clashing possibility of the real relationship between father and son. A moment of loss would be not formed as stock value, it would be the emotional pivot of the trolley. Story broadcasting season focused heavy on the emotional continuously. Animators who encourage the thing like actor consider, submit, hesitate, and researching reacting time. Structure risks the question of loss. During screenplay development, the creative team focused on its most consolation decision rather than including a major character depth in early outline. Multiples possibilities were explored. The decision ultimate circumstance on the narrative necessary. It is a sequel was trolley the middle chapter of the trolley something irreversible had to the cure. It was not a decision made lightly. Animated film, particularly family, organized to be once early embrace in-person loss, but director beloved shielding audience from the sequel would under times thematic authorize. The screenplay grandly shifted toward a structure who lost with a catalyzed transformation, forcing Hiccup into the leadership not by choose but a circumstance. This is a structural decision would later define the emotionally memory of the film, studio confidence, and the production commitment. As the script matured, DreamWorks Ammunition communicated substantial resources to sequel. The studio recognized that the project would not only continue of the franchise but redefine its technology capabilities. By the point, Dreamer Ammunition was investing heavily in a new ammunition system that were debuted fully in this film. Production schedules were extended, teams were extended, research trips were funded. This level of communicate of reflected belief that the sequel would surpass its procedure not merely in the box office terms but is the artist's ambitions. And also be the preparing for visual also be the parallel in the screenplay reflections. The art development began remainings brick and the boarding wood 5 years later. The character designs were updated to be reflect again customized because more layered and the trusted dragons gained more attraction influence. The visual tone stability darkens lighting reflecting shifted toward clouder palettes, especially the external environment beyond brick. These decision refines to be the screenplay maturation theme toward a large goal. By the end of the development phase, the sequel was not longer simple the next adventure. It had become a generational story, a medication on leadership, a physical contest between domination and the empathy, a translation chapter in a planted trolley. The emotional was set, the cost was assembled, the narrative risks were embraced. Now the challenge shifted toward realizing the ambition, visual, and the technology a test that would require groundbreaking advancements and dreamer combinations. This movie break multi box office records due to the because of how to train your dragon to development get a multi tested and the multi things to work on the movie animations, emotions, storytellings and the characters performance. And also be the as the screenplay of how to train your dragon to matured in the bold and the emotionally ambitious blueprint. Another equal importance procedure began unfolding behind the scene. The transformation of the film visual identity 5. If the first film introduced audience to the winds wicked cleft and the stormy sea of brick, and the sequel aimed to be expand that environment into the something fair more generally and the atmospherically immersive. The expensive require more than imaginations, the require research observe and recon words communicate to the adequately moving beyond a general North Sea. In the original film, the Viking world was inspired losing by the landscape but was not tied to any specific real world location. The environment served the narrative effectively. Dramatic cleft troubles occasion and the low fog lakes seeks create a tone. However, for the sequel, director Dan and his team wanted to be something more grounded. If the character were growing up, the world need to be mature alongside them. That mean moving from the generalized fantasy toward and more distancy Norway visuals foundation. The decision was recalibrate Norway also be the runtime of the multi-star cast, the Norway search expeditions. Early in the pre-production, a group of the artist, producer, designer, and the visual development specialist traveled to Norway for an the immersive research trip. Their journey, including time spent in also be the Ossuls, begins various fed regions along the western coast lines. The purpose of trip was not tourist, it was observation team, strict quality, rock formatting, studying the light reflect of galaxy water and also be the photograph code pattern draft between mountain and the peaks. They paid attention to small details, the color narrative in Widstone, the density of moon was vegetation, the layer of the mist and the sunrise, the structure of snow under different lighting condition. These references would later influence how to environment were digitally and still with the filming. Understanding for the major Norway scenes. Norway begin are not merely scenes, they are manually formations covered by the over milestone. Their vertical scale, dramatic depth, and the interplay of water and the rock create natural way of scene. For the art development, for the art department, F. George offered an opportunity to heightens vertically. The sequel flight sequence would not simply guide above rolling hills. They would wave between towering clofting sky, ice, water, and the score into the conversation ice stands series. The scene of the scale was instantly Hiccup world was expanding and the environment need to be visual communicate that expensive the also be the multiplex efforts to create of this film after the main research group completed their tour. Director also along with key collaborators traveled rather north to the remote of the slave board. Several boards in the strict isolation and the dramatically beautiful landscape of ice fields, popular winds, and the intense lines observing polar bears their natural habitat required armed guides the rareness of the environment. For the filmmakers, slave board represented a tonal shift where Berk felt leveling and also be comical. Slave board felt audience of the scholarity. This contrast inspired the creation of the dragon, a vast icy refuge hidden with clearly formation. The article light itself becomes a subject of study. Unlike temperature climates, polar light carries unique qualities. Low angle sunlight for extended hours, soft diffused illuminations, deep blue shadows against snow. So belts gradients across the ice surface. These light characterizations would later influence the sequel atmosphere refines. Team. Collaboration with visual team that translate real world observation into the cinematic storytelling to produce consultated experience. Visual arrives to be the experts in photography. Roger thought primarily now for his live action work and also be previously collaborated with DreamWorks combination as a visually consultant. His guide helped bear to gap between photography release animated stylization and also be the encouraged the team in the consider motivated lighting surface realistic shadow behave atmosphere properties natural color grading instead of overly structured fantastic platies. The sequel learned into a color tones and the environments realize, and also be the particularly in the external scene way from the Berk. Again the world almost agony the world alongside the character. 5 years had passed with the story timeline that mean Break itself require re- redesign, redesign, redesign. The art team imagined how a dragon safety might physically evolve over half a decade. They ask particularly questions. How would building adapt to dragon patches? Would rope system be installed for flight takeoff? What Viking mirror incorporates dragon inspired element. As a result, because more colorful and layered in the sequel, Foden structure displayed more complexity. Marketplace appears more vibrant dragon nest because part of the everyday achievement structures. The environment told a story of the visual communication procedure without heavy expositions. Designing the dragon structure. One of the most appreciated visual creation is the sequel was the dragon Senstochi, an emotional gross canvas serving as a refuge for the countless dragon species. And also be the multiplex peaceful instant story to achieve the artist studio real world ice cave and galaxy formations to examine how light reflect thought thick ice and how frozen surface have vary between and of the translated structure. Expanding dragons biology and movement. The sequel introduced large dragon species including colossal alpha dragons whose size differed everything previously seen. Designing scene creation require animations research, animators studios, elephant muscle structure, hula mass introductions, rebellion scale pattern, NAS movement cycle. The goal was believability with fantasy. Even the large dragons need weight, interior, and the biological plausibility. Environment research influence creature creator design as well. Dragons native to icy regions development thinker texture ever first adapted colorations. These inhabiting warm areas contain more vibrant players. Whether of emotional symbolism in the first film, Storm were dramatic observations. The sequel, whether become more symbolic. Clear keys often represented freedom and exploration. Snowstorm and blizzards symbolized confused or ideology conflict. Ice and fog add mastery to the century introduction. The research trip helped animators understand how snow behave under storm wind, how forced ambulance unevenly and would even diffuse sunlight. These subtle environment details enhance relationship, emotional storytelling. Textual resigns material study. A DreamWorks upgrade its animation software as subject as well explored deeply in the also be the part development embrace more complex structure. They study wet leather again patterns, fairy density and winds response, snow competition under pressure, ice cracking structure. These attention to material reliance helped ground the ancestrally AP narrative in also be the authorization character costume because heavy and more layered, displaced and wear. clocks reacted diametrically to the wind. The world left lived in not preside fantasy but a blazing civilization, a shift toward cinematic. By the end of the visual development phase, the sequel director had solidified vendor landscape color clover and color plates, increased vertical scale, atmosphere depth, strong lighting realization. The first film felt adventure and the intimate. The sequel emanate of the EP of the opportunity. This transformation did not erase the worth of break, amplified the contrast between safety and external threat, and also be the visual scale with emotional stakes. Every research decision ultimately served the narrative as he focused ideology, conflict, and which eventually loss and environment reflected to the magnitude of his internal journey. When he scoured across Jeffords, J. Jorford's the first felt ultimate less. When he stood in icy ocean wave, the world felt accident and humility. When battle across frozen sea, the world left waste and the dangerous. The physically expansive of the gravity mirror emotional expansive of responsibility. With research completed and visual possibility defined, the produce now force a monster technology ambitious phase, translating these complex environment and the character into the groundbreaking animations. This is the most attractive and the long research of this movie on every topics. The technology realization behind the sequel as How to Train Your Dragon to expand emotional and visual. DreamWorks animation force faced a division realization and tools that create the first film would not be enough to achieve the ambition of the sequel. The story had grown large, the environments had become more complex, the dragon had increased in size and automatically details, the lighting realized and become more cinematic. If the sequel was to be supervised to proceeding artificially, the studio would need to be transferred not only its creative but its interior technology foundation. That followed was not of most significant internal visual DreamWorks combinations production history. The problem light of traditional rendering peoples. In early animation workflow, artists often faced a structuring limitations. Complex scene, especially these involving heavy practical effects, layered lighting, and also be the simulations of environment texture require long indoors time, and animators might complete a scene and then wait hours, sometime overnight, to see a fully returned version. And if adjusted where need, the cycle would repeat. For a sequel, a meaning to deliver more dynamic environment, large dragons, and all to be interface fair movement and ice and realistic light to delay pause on the major absence. Creative simply depends on the feedback. If artists must wait 8 hours to allocate their work, experimentation slow. DreamWorks leadership recognized his bottlenecks to unlock the sequel potential. Rendered the proceeding speed had to be improved dramatically. Scalables multi-roads proceeding a new frontier. DreamWorks partners with Also, we develop a system now, a scalable multi-core proceeding. In a simple terms, this technology allowed complex communication tasks to be distributed across multi-procedure cross simulations instead of writing take behind the handling spending on the limit parallel function. They would know how to proceed more efficiently across adventure hardware. This result was transformative. Artists would view rich, layered scene in the near real time instead of waiting overnight to see light result. They would make adjust and see immediately feedback. This fundamentally changed to the rather of the production. Creative designs that more require cohesion planning would now be explored more fairly. Animators could test stable light variations, environmental atmosphere, and character performance tweaks without rare of mass time delay. Studio acceptation deserved his shift and the resolutionality not because ad alone because the creative itself. The birth of primo character animation. While re-entering speed was clear character perform remind the emotional heart of the film. To support deeper emotional storytelling, DreamWorks Animation introduced a new properties to animation software now as a Primo. Primo was designed to give animators more intensity, flexibility, and control over character rings. The early system multiplating complex character models, especially physically expression, require technology precision that could interrupt artist flow. Primo streamlined that process. It allowed animator to adjust physically more acrobatically, gently, real focus, blind stable emotional expression, skin movement over beyond structure, refined micro expression without breaking ring integrity. This improvement was for a sequel centered of maturation of emotional sequence. Hiccup journey require perform before accepting responsibility. Grief players beneath composer quite slower, replacing youthful and uncertainful. Primo enabled these qualities, achieving skin and muscle dynamic. One of the goal of the sequel it is the improve without sufficing stylization. The first film character were expressed build relatively simple in service simulation. The sequel made up deeper automatically and also be the credibility with upon also with upgrades tools, Animator could similarly scan leading over muscle, subtitle jiggle and the weight distributions, cloth reacting more naturally to movement for interference with wind and motions. For Dragon, this was especially important. Massive Alpha Dragon required to believable mass then they moved. Their bodies need to be feel heavy, not weightless. Primo and the improved proceeding power allowed animators to fine-tune these dynamics in way previously impractical. And also be the alongside Primo DreamWorks in implemented in a new light system called torch. Lighting is animation is not merely about brightness. It shapes mood, depth, and emotional tone. Its equal environment ringed from sunlight, floods, icy corners of the storm-filled battlefields, each require distanced atmosphere treatment. Torch enables physically light fall of complex shadow behave and also be the eyes and skin. Atmosphere fog solution realistic reflection on water surface. For example, in this dragon, because of light through eyes had to be scotty responsibility reflexibility light interacting with first require stable diffusion. Torch allowed these effects to be the layered dynamically rather than paint artificially. The result was more cinematic look closer to live action photograph. Introducing technology with art direction. Technology upgrade along not a generation artist success. These may be guided by intention. Director worked closely with technology suppressive enhanced the remlessive did not overpower stylization. The film still need to be feel like a miniature fantasy and a photorealistic documentary. Balance was key. Texture because richer but character design retains expressive aggregations, lighting between more physically accurate but color grading preserved emotionally worth when needed. This tension between technology and art direction becomes a defined feature of the sequel. And also with the Radiant's Mass Dragon Battle, one of the most technology dynamically except of the sequel involve large scale dragons sequence hundreds of dragons filling the sky require embrace completion power each dragon fractured unique winning ammunition cycle enveloping shadow particularly effect of snow and the birds environmentally interactions in early production. Such density light require simplicity background elements with the new multi-core proceeding pipes. Dreamer could maintain detail even in wide shot. This allowed battle scene to feel impressive rather than abstract. And also with the enhanced environmental complexity. The Norway research had inspired artificial environment Jeffers with layered cliffs, ice cave with refracting sulfur, snow covered forest with dynamic and the pattern, torch and the proceeding made it possible to enter the ice to be translation, snow display under movement, water reflecting interest to be moving, clouds, layered atmosphere has previously, artists might fake certain effect to save proceeding time. Now they would pressurize more attacks and simulations. Production scale, workforce expansion. By the time full production was underway, more than 500 artists, animators, engineers, and technology were contributed to the cross multi-dreamer locations. The technology overhauls require training. Artists had to be learn new interface technology. Director develop update pipelines. Engineering fine tunes performance optimization. The production because a collaboration between creative and the technology minds and the under pressure scale. The sequel was not simply began animated, it was researched the studio inflation, creative freedom, thought, technology speed. The most foundable impact of these technology advance was the physically when artists feel contrasted by slow feedback loops they because when they are interrupted quickly they become bold. The sequel EP environment emotional layered perform and large scale dragon sequel were made possible not only by artists combined but the newfound creative speed. This synergy between technology and the storytelling equate to the film Beyond began a bigger sequel. It is the milestone with DreamWorks combination elevations, preparing for emotional climax and ammunition matured, and the sequels were assembled. The film most emotionally intense scene damage extremely stable movement of Jeep stock and the require controlling lighting, minimize distance in the background elements, precision special animation, careful timed camera movement. The upgrade tool allowed animators to reduce spectral during the imitate scenes and the focusing on the performance detail. Technology served emotion, not the other way around. The studio transformed by the completion of the production driver combination had found, fundamentally modernized its workflow. This advanced stage during the making of How to Train Your Dragon 2 would influence subsequent studio project that become part of the studio long-term production foundation. In many ways, the sequel was both a narrative midpoint in a trolley and a technology turning point of the studio itself. And also with the multi-star cast, visuals, VFX, the movie great opportunity to upgrade everything, every part on the box office. How to Train Your Dragon to break the multi-box of records get a huge success. I hope you can enjoy this video. Please like my video, subscribe my YouTube channel. I will continue with again movie development, marketing, reception, storytelling. As production advanced on How to Train Your Dragon 2 in the creative team forced to the most duplicate phase of the interior procedure, finally narrate influenced by the stage, the world had expanded, the ammunition technology had evolved, and the cast had recording significant portion of the dialogues. Yet one circular question remained: how fair was the filming willing to be the emotionally? If the sequel was truly the middle chapter of a trolley, it need to be the alter the trajectory of the story permanently. It could, and also be the it could simply introduce large dragons of the granted battles. It had the transfer Hiccup in a way that would not be undone, and also be the debate over irreversible change. During the early development discussion, director of How to Train Your Dragon to Daniel has already considered the necessity of the meaningful sequence. However, communicating that idea to the final screenplay require courage. Animated films, especially these appealing the families, traditionally avoid paramount loss among central character. Emotional tension in often resolved safety, but Daniel believed that protecting the audience from the if would under time the authority of the Hiccup narration. The sequel revolved around the leadership and the achievement to inhabits leadership. Conversely, Hiccup need to be a comfort, not just technological but personal loss. Originally, alternate story path were explored different character and considered as a potential vitamins of the narration turning point. Each option was evaluated not for seek value but for structural impact. The decision ultimate content on the stock. These have narration foundations. Voiced by the grand battle, Stook had representation, story tradition, and the mental procedure. In the first film, the Isabel Viking yet love, but within the framework of trolley Strico continuous present create a structural competition along remain chief Hiccup accent to be leadership could feel delay of tended. The sequel was about transmission For Hiccup to fully step into adulthood, the safety jet of the father authorized need to be the disappear, not thought ability of the present, but thought tragedy to create team understand weight of these kind killings took was not simply a plot device, it was a statement that story would not retreat of our emotional realizations crafting the moment of loss. Once the decision was made, the next challenge was execution. The scene had to be avoided. Borderlands need to be the resistance. It need to be the silence where opportunity. It need to be the piece of audience to proceed shocks along Secope. The trolley would occur not because stick was weak, but because circumference beyond control. The villain multiples of dragons, particularly Toothless, stand the emotional below Hiccup Closer's company because an unwilling instruction of loss. The layering of the conduction heightens to Hiccup lost his father. Hiccup lost his father. Toothless is the organized against his well. Thus, execution of tension. The moment was designed to fracture Hiccup confidence temporary for a brief period he would debate rather empty code without depressibility. His performance emotionally recording sensation for the scene damaged extremely emotional focus. Jay performed as Hiko required controlled. The character could not into a despair permanently. Permanently, he need to be proceed grift and the evolution into a leadership. Battle of the final scene carry a quiet generally the tone avoid theatrical extension instead the emphasis reset a particularly love on the capture. Behind the microphone actor often perform the isolation imaging emotional stakes without physically set up the costume. The emotional weight of the sequence realized heavy on a vocal fans. Animators later studied these recording closely matching microphone expression and the breath timing in the performance. Trusted voice. During the refilming procedure, directors thought feedback the respective filmmaker among these consolation was the who had arrived to the first installment. Director Daniel Tree engaged the courage of the performer's transmission requires sacrifice. Protecting major character from the sequence might prove comfort, but it would be limit narrative depth. This positive director the sequel would embrace risk rather than retreat from it. Balance darkness in hope. Introduce trilogy into a animated adventure carries rather dance too much darkness and the ultimate young audience too little can realize loss. The creative team carefully structured the emotional art after stalking death. Instead of spying into a despair, the story points toward Hiccup does not embrace to physically, he does not see revenge, thought domination. Instead, he proving that composition can embrace even the devastations. This decision raised the truly moral core. Visual language of visual language. The film upgrade animation tool played a significant role in the conveying emotional during these sequences. Lighting shifted subtly, color tones dominated with the aftermath. Shadow lengthened, environmental movement slowed. The ones vibrate brick appear mute during the field sequence. Snow falling gently rise rather than choose the camera movement because restraints with short lighting, comically morning close up lightnings of the Hiccup Center struggle. Technology enables stable not these of moment, music and emotional achievement. Thought not detailed the early production note Music come in shape the sequel, its tune, the score need to be humor, filming themes, violin depends emotional research, the musical direction, winding expressive grand during the tragic scene, instead unfollowed music bright to be translated between grief and the helping the audience move emotionally without abrupt shifts. Preparing for the path of the final chapter. By the end of the sequel, Hiccup assumed leadership, not thought triumphed alone, but thought earned realization. He stands achieved not because he defined an enemy, but because he embraced loss without principle. This distance was circle. The second film does not. The saga it's prepares the foundation for the final installation. Hiccup identity is now defined not by debate by its tested conversations. The trolley structure because early film 1 deserve and transformation, film 2 loss and ammunitions, film 3 resolution and the legacy. The sequel emotional achievement before functional as a hinge connecting youthful optimization to adult responsibility. Production completion and studio impact and animation verbed are the final edits where Assemble's dreamer combination recognized that the project had reshaped the studio. The technology advancement introduced during production would influence future films. The villains embrace emotional conservation set as new tune of animated storytelling with the company. More than 500 artists across multi-studio branches had continued to be filming realization the collaborative effects spanning years of iteration experiment of the multi-star cast. I hope you can enjoy this video. In this video I will fully explain the how to train your dragon to story, movie plot, storytelling, full movie story step by step, and then I explain movie development in under deep plan, movie development, star cast, also engineers and artist history. Set let's the history and let's the every talk of my the end. I hope you can enjoy this video. Please like my video, subscribe my YouTube channel for upcoming Hollywood movies, latest update and full movies reviews. In this video I will use movie images and movie clips. I use these clips due to YouTube fair purpose policy. I am not owner of these clips. I use these clips to review movie for movie fans. I am not owner of these clips. The credit of these clips give to respective owner. I use these clips and images due to YouTube fair purpose policy under section. I hope you can enjoy this video. Please write down your opinion in the comment section. This video is made for only educational purpose. The original content has the respective owner. Like my video, subscribe my YouTube channel. I will back in the next video. Thanks for watching the end how to train your dragon to storytelling and development. Goodbye, take care.